Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 27 ranked team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the Seattle Seahawks. Make sure to hit the like and leave a comment below in the comments section. I have been upsetting quite a few fan bases early on, but of course everyone thinks that their team can't possibly be terrible, and then every other team is worse than theirs, or at least some teams are worse than theirs. And this is just my assessment. My assessment after I grade all the players and all the coaches, and I have a little formula. It's in the bio section, comment, the bio of the video. It has the whole thing there so you can see how exactly I came to it with percentages and whatnot. But Seattle's an interesting team. You know, they kind of made, I don't want to say it's a lateral move because Pete Carroll is like 98,000 years old, but they stayed with a defensive head coach. Less of a CEO type in Mike Macdonald, who's really had a meteoric rise in the coaching ranks, both college and professionally, over the last couple of years. He was the mind behind last year's #1 defense in the entire league, and that's really why they brought him in. Generally, you'll see teams make changes from a defensive-minded coach to an offensive-minded coach. But that generally comes with the introduction of like a young rookie quarterback, either that year or the year prior. That's not the case. They have Geno Smith, who I am very concerned about. You know, this is going to be his third offensive system in 3 years, and he really peaked with Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator, now head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Sort of regressed a little bit, and you just want to see what he can continue to do. And if this is just going to be part of the downfall, maybe he peaked that one season and then was 80% of what he was last year, and now is he going to be 80% of what he was last year this year? It's a questionable situation. They did trade for Sam Howell, which I don't think is of much consequence, to be honest with you guys. What is of big consequence on the offensive side of the ball is the offensive line, and we'll get into all of my concerns with that offensive line, and I think it's really going to be the thing that's going to drag down this offense into a situation where this is probably why they're ranked the way that they are. I think they're coached relatively well on defense. They got some interesting defensive pieces. I think they're a little weak in some areas on the defense, particularly off the edge. Boya Mafe really came into his own at the end of the year, and then it's trying to find a second guy there, like a true edge guy. Uchenna Nwosu was okay, and then he was really good, then he wasn't good. Very up and down with him. He's also more of a traditional 3-4 outside linebacker, which may actually play into his hand a little bit more now with Mike Macdonald there. But edge rushers in particular weren't a significant feature of the Mike Macdonald offense. A lot of that happened in the secondary, and the secondary here is actually quite good. They got Julian Love, Tariq Woolen, Devon Witherspoon. They got some good bodies out there, including they drafted some pretty underrated guys who I think can be real stars in this defense the way they're performing. I look at Julian Love, former New York Giant, came to Seattle last year, played really well under Pete Carroll's defense, and now is being set up by a defensive-minded head coach and a defensive coordinator in a system that made safeties thrive. And could he end up taking on, we talk about the role of Kyle Hamilton. We talked about the Kyle Hamilton role previously in the last video that we did with the Tennessee Titans, in terms of getting a safety with a specific skill set. Is that Rayshawn Jenkins? He might be a little out of it. Or is it Julian Love? I think that's going to be really interesting to see and how all that all unfolds. But it really does start with the coaching staff. They make up 30% of my overall grade. And it's an interesting group. So let's get into it and start with the head coach, Mike Macdonald, coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. He was probably the most highly sought after defensive-minded coach that there was, with the retirement of Pete Carroll, retirement/firing. He was kind of losing the plot there. This was a really good move to make. Seattle's always, not for nothing, had a pretty good built-in culture. And I think Mike Macdonald can bring over a good cultural aspect to this team. You know, he was with the Michigan Wolverines for a while, back and forth with Baltimore. But the key thing is why he got hired, like we talked about at the top, is because that Baltimore defense was historically great. And that's historically great by even Baltimore Ravens standards, which says a lot about what he was able to accomplish. He brings with him Aiden Dirda, however you pronounce his last name. He's actually from North London, England. He's the defensive coordinator. He came over from Dallas. He was part of the Dallas coaching staff as I believe he was a defensive backs coach and a defensive line coach as well. I think he did a little bit of both there. But I think it was mostly defensive line. He also had some, linebacker coach experience. He's really actually a well-rounded positional coach, which is why I like him as the 19th best defensive coordinator coming in. He's worked with Dan Quinn in particular quite a bit, really learned that way. So you're combining probably the two best defensive systems from last year into one. So that's why, it's hard to grade a brand new head coach. McDonald is 23rd to go with his 19th ranked defensive coordinator. Then you got Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, who I ranked 28th. And he was I believe he was the offensive coordinator for the University of Washington just last year. So he's coming over from college, which is something, frankly, Mike Macdonald did coming over from Michigan to be the defensive coordinator of Baltimore. So I'm not really jumping all over that concept. But there is something about making that level of a transition, because the college game and the pro game on offense in particular is a very different type of ball game altogether. So that's what is worrisome to me. He was also the offensive coordinator at Fresno State. He was an offensive line coach at the University of East Michigan. So that's a plus, because we'll get to my fears when it comes to the offensive line on this team in particular. A really underrated hire, though, for this coaching staff that's hard to really measure is the assistant head coach, Leslie Frazier, who left Buffalo under questionable circumstances. So it'll be interesting to see what his role exactly is in guiding brand new head coach Mike Macdonald. And that's also why Mike Macdonald, of all the new head coaches, the young head coaches, gets that little bit of an extra boost to 23rd. Again, it's hard to rank brand new head coaches anywhere inside the top 20 unless they're like a big name with like a huge backstory, like if Andy Reid were to switch teams or something to that degree. Another key assistant coach is, Leslie Frazier, of course, helping probably oversee some of the defense strategies, but I think he's mostly there just to help guide the head coaching aspect, is the offensive line coach Scott Huff, who just spent 7 seasons at the Washington Huskies. So Ryan Grubb is bringing over Scott Huff with him from the University of Washington. Now raise your hand, put in the comment section a particular Washington Husky that has blown you away as an offensive line talent in the last 7 years. It's tough to name more than a couple, more than like one or two, if there's even two, because there's Troy Fautanu, who just got drafted this year, but there's no word on what kind of professional football player he's going to be. the tools are all there. I think he's personally Zach Martin 2.0, but who on that Washington Huskies offensive line has really blown people away lately in the last 7 years? I'm not really seeing that. Now, it would be interesting to go through and look at some of the Washington Huskies players in terms of how well they were recruited out of high school and then what that turned into throughout their time in college. To be honest, I haven't done that level of research. I don't know very many people that have or that are willing to. I feel like if you pretty much you can name day 1, day 2 picks on that Washington offensive line over the last couple of years is sort of your answer. And this Washington team got good right here in the last couple of seasons, when they found a role for Michael Penix, and that's really what got these guys hired. It's that transition. It's that transition from the pro game to the pro game from the college game. Luckily they're so well coached on defense. I think the Leslie Frazier thing is gonna hold a little bit of significance here, but I think overall it's a tight race with the coaching staffs here. They are the 27th ranked coaching staff. It's tough. It's tough to say either way. This is just how it fell. Now moving on to the player grades here, and it's going to be Geno Smith, who's tied for 20th out of all my ranked quarterbacks, gets an 82 grade. I have my reservations about Geno. 2 years ago, he got given the starting quarterback job. People didn't really understand it, and he played great football for the first, I'd say, 80% of that season. Started to regress a little bit towards the end, but overall, take the full season as it was, he was fantastic. Dave Canales then moved to Tampa Bay, and we saw Geno sort of take a step back last year. He wasn't the same dynamic, holy crap quarterback we'd seen prior in that 1 year. His first year as a starter in Seattle. Bringing in a brand new coaching staff. A third time it's a brand new offense. I do have my reservations about Geno Smith not being able to sustain and also taking another step back again. Is it going to be a significant step back? Probably not. I still think he can perform like a top 20 quarterback. But he was arguably top 10 2 years ago. Last year, he was probably top 15 for most of the season. I think this year he's going to take a step back into another tier again. Just because of the inconsistencies of having to constantly recycle these schemes. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised because Atlanta took him at 8. I wouldn't have been surprised had Seattle gotten Michael Penix just because they brought over the entire Washington Huskies staff. That alone is Geno Smith and Michael Penix comparable as players? I mean, maybe a little bit. I don't know. I wouldn't go all the way with it. Maybe a little bit. Maybe with a good receiving group, a very similar skilled receiving group, at least in terms of playing styles, they can get a similar output here. But again, my concerns for Geno is, does he have the ability to produce based upon the skill levels around him, such as the offensive line? What's that production going to look like, and how is that going to affect his play? And how much can the system adapt to allow him to have success? Is another big thing for why I feel like another step of regression is going to be coming his way. Sam Howell, I don't know that he's going to have as much of an impact. I think he's going to be a solid backup option. But, again, it's a completely different system altogether too, so it's hard to say that with this brand new regime that they're just going to be able to turn out backup quarterbacks. that people are seeking. But I think that if Geno Smith does struggle, they will go to Sam Howell and see if maybe this system from Grubb is more suitable to him than what he's had previously in Washington. That's something to keep an eye on with that Eric Bieniemy system. Now he's got this completely different one. Maybe that's what's better suited for Sam Howell and will lead to more success for him. And maybe they've done sort of what they did with Geno Smith when they traded Russell Wilson, is they inherited a quarterback that can get them through the next 3-4 years being competitive, 2-3-4 years being competitive. I think Geno's contract is sort of the thing that's also going to keep him from playing with this team past this year, barring some top 10 performances. And I just don't think that's in the cards for Geno Smith this season. I think that, it struck midnight on Cinderella being Geno Smith. One thing this team has that I really, really like is the backfield. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet is a fantastic 1-2 punch. Tied for 6th in the league for me of all the running back tandems, running back rooms in the entire league. They also did a good job of getting some depth in there. They drafted Kenny McIntosh when they drafted Charbonnet to sort of be like that backup third down back, while Charbonnet's the backup first and second down back. But they also picked up George Halani, Kobe Lewis, who are really quietly good first, second down options in terms of depth at least. Now, I don't anticipate too many people getting more early down work considering the quality of the top two guys here. But as we go to the receiving back aspect, Kenneth Walker, I give him 10th best receiving back in the league. Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh, I like them together to sort of split those roles, though I think Charbonnet is going to get a lot more early down work. I think Kenny McIntosh is going to have more opportunities this year to grow into the third down receiving back threat that he was drafted to be. I think Charbonnet did well with the opportunities he was given. McIntosh didn't really take advantage of them the way that I think people thought he would when he did get chances. But I think you can see him maybe developing that aspect of his game a little bit more. I think that they'll be more inclined to really pound the football on teams if they can get away with it. They'll probably want to shorten games a lot more because their defense, I'm assuming they're going to think very highly of their defense. They're going to think highly of their defensive scheme, so they're going to want games to be shorter, give opposing offenses less opportunities to move the ball down the field, and just take your chances that your defense is going to be really good. And they can do that with this backfield. How the offensive line opens up the holes for this backfield is another story altogether. But I think just in terms of the quality of the talent, it's going to be hard to really hold them back despite the offensive line deficiencies. And these are projected offensive line deficiencies that could be fixed. If they coach them up well, you make the scheme doable, you put the right guys in the right places, this could be a very viable offense just from the backfield's abilities alone. Top 10 in both running back categories for me. Just quality group. Now moving on to the wide receivers. They're the 15th ranked wide receiver room for me, right smack dab in the middle. The top two receivers, DK and Lockett. Just a really good group. Really good 1-2 punch. JSN being worked along there as like that slot receiver. The fact that they brought back Tyler Lockett, really stopped JSN from reaching into that next role on the offense, which I think people were thinking he would take on this year, and that they would let Tyler Lockett go. Didn't really work out that way, but hey, that's better for the offense overall. If JSN's your number 3 wide receiver, that says a lot about your wide receiver room. DK, that prototypical wide receiver 1, height, weight, speed, he's got it all. How he helps put it together makes things easier for his quarterback, how that scheme really functions with him. I would look to Washington wide receivers, Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, guys like that. They had a lot of guys get picked from that wide receiver room. So not for nothing, if there's any type of transferable production for this offensive scheme that's coming over this team, it's that the wide receivers could be very, very productive And with the skill sets here, it's a variety of skill sets here, just like the ones they had at the University of Washington just a season ago. So they could work these guys into certain roles that could yield a lot of success. They got some good backups here. Jake Bobo, very quietly a great depth wide receiver 4 here. Laviska Shenault quietly coming over to this team. It's going to be that gadget slot wide receiver. We'll probably see him out of the backfield maybe a couple times too. Just trying to create matchup issues for the opposing defenses. Where this weapons group kind of takes a bit of a nosedive is at the tight end position. They're tied for 27th for me. Because you got Noah Fant gets a 72. Pharaoh Brown, who just was insanely good in New England last year, he gets a 72 grade as well. It'll be interesting to see which one of those guys wins out that role. I would look to AJ Barner, though, as being a sleeper to end up being the starting tight end. Maybe not right away, but as the season progresses, just because he may not be the best receiving tight end right now, but in terms of his blocking ability, he is up there coming into this league with a real strength in that aspect. I would anticipate him getting some early down work, especially because Noah Fant's not really known for his blocking. So you get into those running situations, AJ Barner is like you're adding a George Kittle quality blocking tight end that's giving you basically 5.5 offensive linemen. I wouldn't say 6 offensive linemen. He's obviously not the quality of a blocker as an offensive lineman, but it's about as close to a 6th offensive lineman as you can get from a tight end in this league right now. And that's how highly I project AJ Barner coming into the NFL. And I think he ended up in a really good situation just because there's so many other mouths to feed on this offense in terms of Walker, McIntosh, Charbonnet, DK, Lockett, JSN. He could, for all intents and purposes, find his way into being the tight end that gets a majority of the snaps this year just because he brings something different to the offense that opens up the run game maybe a little bit more for an offensive line that is certainly going to struggle, I think, at least early on in the year. So look out for him to maybe end up being the guy who ends up being the starter here, even though they brought back Noah Fant. They brought back Noah Fant to be a receiver, to be that extra receiver. So in pure passing situations, I could see him out there. They'll want to create matchup difficulties. But AJ Barner, man, could be an extra blocker in there, and they could still field 3 wide receivers. They can still have someone coming out of the backfield. So if you're in there and you're facing a team that's blitzing a lot, you could theoretically put AJ Barner in the game, anticipate pressure. If you get it, he stays in line and helps block. And if you don't get it, he can run a little delay route. And it's not like you're getting a completely incompetent receiving tight end either. You're getting somebody who you can definitely develop throughout the year. So that's a real sleeper right there. But they got a really good wide receiver room that I think is going to be where a lot of their passing production is going to be made anyway, as is with most teams. So ranking at 15th, JSN I think can continue to grow, and that by the end of the year they could probably be playing with a more like a top 12 wide receiver room. And as their tight ends, they find a role for them, they could probably find their way into maybe like the top 24, top 23 tight end groups by the end of the year, as depending on what they decide to do with AJ Barner. Now here comes the real issue with this offense. It's the offensive line. We'll start with pass blocking. They're ranked 31st. Charles Cross, I think he's a quality young left tackle. What they got going on the other side with Abraham Lucas, he's really going to have to step his game up. Oluwatimi there, I think he's a decent center. Laken Tomlinson's really, I think, got a lot to prove, after his stint with the Jets. I really like the pickup of Christian Haynes from UConn. I think he's probably the best all-around interior offensive lineman in year one coming out of the draft. I think that he's going to be an asset in the pass blocking and the run blocking. Abraham Lucas is the real bubble guy right now, and he's going to be the X factor here that makes or breaks this offensive line, especially with George Fant breathing down his neck, who's a really, really good pass blocker. He's a veteran player. I think he's really, really good. I like Nick Harris to be someone who low-key competes for that left guard spot. I think there's a real possibility there, and especially if they're looking to get their top 5 guys on the field just to make things as quality as possible, we could see both George Fant and Nick Harris being starters at least at some point in the season. I think that they're committed to Abraham Lucas, especially after his rookie season. Took a step back in his second year in the league. That was a bad step back. It wasn't great. It led to a lot of issues with the way the offense was functioning. So you're hoping that he can get it back together, because even when you go to the run blocking, they're my last ranked run blocking offensive line. Laken Tomlinson, Oluwatimi, not known for their run blocking. Charles Cross, not known for his run blocking. Abraham Lucas, a better run blocker than a pass blocker, but still not exactly what you would call quality, especially coming off of last season. Christian Haynes is really the best option that you got. He's sort of like, he's a quality rookie offensive lineman who's going to give you everything in every aspect. But this is a real detriment to this football team, so it doesn't really matter how much talent you got there playing running back. If this offensive line can't open the holes for him, it's going to be a long season for these guys. George Fant, not a particularly good run blocker either. They don't, other than Stone Forsythe, they don't really have good depth in terms of run blocking support either. So if you get George Fant out there, you get Nick Harris out there, it's probably a wash between those two with Laken Tomlinson and Abraham Lucas, and they'd probably still be the last ranked run blocking group. So where you'd really improve is here in the pass blocking. So I could see that potentially being something after the first quarter, around the first half of the season, that being a full-time move if we don't see progression, particularly from Abraham Lucas, where they can drastically improve the quality of the pass blocking on either side. Really, Fant and Charles Cross get almost even grades for me. So that would drastically change the quality of the offensive line for pass blocking, the pressure is on Abraham Lucas to step up and perform. Nick Harris competing with Oluwatimi there. He's not a better pass blocker, it's not much of a difference, but I would put Oluwatimi better. I would say Nick Harris is about as better at run blocking as Oluwatimi is at pass blocking than him. Very little deviation. So you want to kind of go with the younger guy there. I sort of get that. But it's Laken Tomlinson's veteran status playing in between two young players. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And of course, this is on the assumption that Christian Haynes is the type of player that I think he is. If Christian Haynes comes out and struggles and everyone else plays the way that I'm expecting them to, then this is the worst offensive line in football in both aspects of the game. And that is a huge detriment to this team coming in, which is why I can't stress enough the offensive line coaching for this group is significant. It is as in need of it as any team in the NFL. And I can't name more than 2 Washington offensive linemen in the last 5 years that have come into the league that have been worth anything. So that's a giant concern. It's what really is dragging down this offense and its potential given the other players, particularly in the weapons group. It's bad. It's bad. So again, just a quick positional summary here. It's really the offensive line that makes or breaks this offense in all ways. The quality of the starters, quarterback, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, it's all pretty good. It's all pretty good stuff. It's literally on the backs of the offensive line and how this offensive coaching staff gets this offensive line together, finds a way to get the best 5 guys on the field for all situations, and develops some of the younger players, Charles Cross, Christian Haynes, Abraham Lucas, Oluwatimi. There's a lot of young players on this offensive line also that are going to need to be developed to become better pros. So a lot of pressure on this offensive coaching staff. So overall, this is my 26th ranked offense, 74.34 grade, 75.3 passing offense, 26th in the league, 72.9 rushing offense, 25th in the league. Really dragged down drastically by projected poor offensive line play. They could get into the top 20 in all these categories that the offensive line can perform like a top 20 offensive line. I think this offense is one of those in the NFL right now that's going to live or die based upon the quality of that offensive line play. Now moving on to the defense, we'll start with the edge rushers here in the front four. They're tied for 26th. Boyamafe, Darrell Taylor seem to be the top two pure pass rushing options here. Boyamafe was starting to come into his own there last season. I think continued progression is in the cards for him. Uchenna Nwosu is sort of like this hybrid linebacker pass rusher. I would anticipate him to maybe even get on the field in a lot of these situations, have him run three edge rushers in terms of like skill set and whatever at the same time. Derek Hall, who was drafted in the second round, I don't know, that seems to be a bit of a throwaway pick at this point. They picked up Nelson Caesar, a rookie who is just whatever. He's going to compete for a roster spot with Joshua Onojiegu. They're still looking. Boyamafe's still not he's still not like that edge one in the NFL. If he's still like a lower end edge one, he'd be a really high level edge two. So if they were able to find some sort of pass rushing progression here from some of these players, a lot of inconsistencies in this group. They decided to invest on the interior, though. They're tied for 7th with their interior rush by drafting Byron Murphy, and I feel like that was just the best player available type deal. They're getting a really good interior pass rusher right out the gate there. He gets an 82 grade. And pairing him up with Leonard Williams, that's a good little 1-2 punch there on the interior. So they're going to get these pocket collapsing interior rushers. I think Jerron Reed can get some work there as well. He's not half bad either. Draymond Jones, who they invested in, who hasn't really lived up to the money, I think he could be pretty good as well. They got some good depth here for the interior to counteract maybe the deficiencies they have on the edge. I think in a base formation, they could do some real damage here, but the concern is how much the edge rush is going to affect the quality of the interior rush. They're going to need to find that in this defensive scheme, and it's not a defensive scheme that has a history here. Particularly, it's going to be Mike McDonald's scheme mixed in with that Dan Quinn influence. It's not a scheme that's notoriously producing these high-level productive edge rushers. It is, however, known for producing the interior rushers. We saw Justin Matabuke have a huge year just last year. We've seen other players perform really well and develop really well into being quality players on Baltimore just last year. Maybe that's the strategy here. Work on collapsing those pockets from the interior and make the job easier for edge rushers. Just have the edge rushers be a little bit more disciplined in order to get quarterbacks sort of running into sacks, make their jobs a lot easier. But I don't expect a very high, outside of really Boyamafe maybe, a high, pass rush win rate from this edge group. I expect to see it from this interior group more likely than not. Now moving on to their linebackers in coverage, and they're tied for 6th here with Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker. Two really good linebackers. They're two smaller guys that play linebacker, but they did play a traditional linebacker roles in their previous teams, Buffalo and Miami. I actually really like them. This is an upgrade from last year. They didn't get much in the passing game from Bobby Wagner, even less from guys like Devin Bush and Jordan Brooks. So I actually really like this group they're putting out there. I think they're going to really help out against tight ends, picking out running backs out of the backfield, especially within this division. With Kyron Williams and Christian McCaffrey especially, you're going to see a lot of those situations where running backs are going to be big time in the passing game. Also, you look at some of the tight ends in this division, Trey McBride, George Kittle, even Tyler Higbee. There's quality tight ends here too that these guys are going to have to play. Very disciplined zone, even gets matched up in some man coverage sometimes. And I think they put together a pretty good group to help counteract it to the best that you possibly can against players that are that high quality. John Radigan sort of serves as your early down linebacker. I don't expect him to get much work here on third down in these passing situations. Tyrese Knight, okay, a lot of these like depth pieces, most likely special teams contributors in this linebacker group. But in terms of starter quality, it's hard to find a better 1-2 punch here than what they've been able to put together in this offseason. So thumbs up to that. We saw Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen both really thrive under the Mike Macdonald system. I don't know that either one of these guys can truly take on the role of a Roquan Smith, but there is some like Patrick Queen qualities in both of them. So maybe you end up with 2 Patrick Queens. I don't know. Moving on to the cornerback group, and this is the real strength of this defense. They're 10th in terms of starters, but their depth is what really makes this shine through. We'll start with the starters. Devon Witherspoon, Michael Jackson, Tariq Woolen. Quality corners. You expect Devon Witherspoon to take another step forward, but he had a really good rookie year. Tariq Woolen didn't play as well as he did in his rookie year, but was still a good player. Michael Jackson has sort of been this underlying, low-key, under the radar, really, really good starting quality corner. You get into some of their depth too. They drafted DJ James, who he's really great as well. I really like his coverage skills. Nehemiah Pritchett's another one. Really love his coverage skills. Kobe Bryant's going to make this team. He's sort of like a hybrid safety. I think he's going to be more of a backup to Julian Love than he is necessarily going to be a corner coming into the season, especially because they went and got DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett. They still have Trey Brown. They still have Artie Burns. There's a lot of quality here in this cornerback room that they can put a nice little mix in here and potentially, depending on who they're playing, really play some, situational matchups here. I think Devon Witherspoon's going to be obviously the constant, but there might be games where he's playing outside. There might be games where he's playing in the slot and vice versa. There might be games where DJ James maybe gets more reps than maybe Michael Jackson does, just based upon, situational matchups. It's a really, really good group, and it plays into the strengths of this coaching staff historically. Even when you look at the safety coverage, they got the 12th ranked safety coverage group. Now, they don't have a whole lot in terms of depth, which is why I also sort of lean to Kobe Bryant being maybe used as more of a safety given the other players in the cornerback room. But Kayvon Wallace is nothing to be sneezed at there as a number 2 safety, with Julian Love coming off probably his best season as a pro as well. And now getting, again, mixed up with a coach that is notoriously really good at developing particularly safeties. Marcus Williams, Geno Stone, Kyle Hamilton were like 3 of the top 15 safeties in the league last year, all played on the same team under Mike Macdonald. So there's something to that. Depth-wise, again, not much there. Rayshawn Jenkins is more of somebody you want to see on early downs. Jarek Reed, maybe the same thing. There are going to be some situational issues here because I don't look at Kayvon Wallace and Julian Love in particular as being good against the run. But in just purely in pass coverage, this safety group is really good. They're going to have to significantly develop them in the run game, figure out effective ways to use them to get around the deficiencies that this group is going to have in the run that we'll get to. But against the pass, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more balanced, deep secondary than what Seattle is going to be putting on the field this upcoming season. Now we're going towards the edge group against the run, and they're tied for 19th. Boyamafe still gets out there. This is where Uchenna Nwosu is really going to get opportunities here. This is where that skill set of being like linebacker / edge combination really is effective for him, which makes him more of a threat over Darrell Taylor, who I think is just going to be more of a situational pass rusher for them. But this is probably going to be the two guys that get the most snaps for the edge, is Boyamafe and Uchenna Nwosu. Nelson Caesar, I think, is under the radar here as being somebody who can enter this edge rotation on early downs. The interior defensive line does take a significant step back. They're tied for 17th. Byron Murphy not nearly as good against the run. Larry Williams kind of just is what he is. I think he's solid across the board. They lose a lot of their depth in the run game as well. So how they navigate finding the right combination of people here to be playing in their front four on early downs, it could be a real detriment to this defense. This is where the coaching is really going to have to come into play, because seems to be a defense that was built to really just defend the pass and then just hope for the best against the run, particularly here on the front four. Moving on to their linebacker group, and they're tied for 14th. Terrell Dodson stays on the field. I think he gets the green dot here. And then this is where John Radigan gets on the field, because Jerome Baker is just not good against the run at all. Like, really at all. Tyrese Knight and Drake Thomas, I think, will be competing for some of these early down reps. Patrick O'Connell, I think, is the odd man out. He's sort of just not good at either one. At best, he's a practice squad special teams player. But for your top, if you're going to go into a more of a base 4-3, a certain type of 3-4, Uchenna Nwosu, does he play on the edge? Does he play more of an outside linebacker role on early downs in base formation? It'll be interesting to see how they use that. But still, this linebacker group is an improvement on what they had last year, outside of, Bobby Wagner, one of the best linebackers last year against the run. Didn't really produce on later downs. I think they found much more balance with this new redesigned group of linebackers. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier when talking about the defensive backs in terms of their ability against the pass. This is my last ranked group in terms of DB run support. This is where the defensive coaching staff is really going to have to shine, creating pressure off the edge and the run support from the defensive backs, finding the right combination of guys in the secondary to really support that front seven. It's a nightmare. Julian Love, not good against the run. Kayvon Wallace, not good against the run. Really, Jarek Reed and Rashawn Jenkins, I would say, not good against the run. So they got four guys not good against the run at all. Kobe Bryant is sort of in this same range here with these guys against the run in terms of what his grade is. So there's not a whole lot here in the secondary for run support. A lot of the work is going to be done on being very disciplined off the edge, which, credit where it's due, that sort of was the MO of that Baltimore Ravens defense, was play disciplined off the edge and funnel everything to your interior defensive line and linebackers, where the strength of that Baltimore defense was. But they also had the support of guys like Kyle Hamilton and that sort of ilk on the outside in their safety group that was able to step up and play the run as well. That helped when things sort of went wrong and the edges weren't set properly, or, defensive line was able to get blocked out and whatnot. Offensive line were able to climb to the next level successfully. They had some backup plan there. They don't have that here now. So it'll be interesting to see how ineffective, perhaps, how many big plays in particular they give up in the run game this year, because they don't have that same back end contingency plan that someone like Mike McDonald would be used to from his last 2 years in Baltimore. So again, taking a look at the positional summaries here. Solid pass defense, completely solid, nothing to sneeze at there. The concern comes in the run game and the propensity to perhaps give up big plays here. They're going to get some quality support from their actual corners. The safeties, though, are going to be of concern. The depth of the front four is going to be of concern as well, because it's really the same four guys. There's really like five guys that can play the edge. And then there's the same really 5 guys that are playing on the interior. So how you work that rotation and not get caught with the wrong personnel on the field given the situation is going to be a real challenge for the coaching staff this year. So overall, this is a tale of 2 defenses. An overall grade of 74.8, good for 17th in the league. The 7th ranked pass defense, 77.8, but the tied for 27th rush defense at 70.3. It's just finding the right group of guys, developing them. They have a really good coaching staff in place for at least defensive football. But the focus needs to be on the running game. You've got all the talent in the world to play quality pass defense as long as you're able to search up the proper edge group. So this is the overall grade, 75.19, 27th overall ranked team in the league. Coaching staff gets a 76.75 rating, good for 27th. Overall offense, 26th at 74.34. And the total defense, 74.8, 17th overall in the league. So this is really, I think, the tale of the team. You know, a regressing offense because of the constant changing of staff, you know, poor offensive line play, aging quarterback, and, you know, aging weapons group perhaps, and then a defense that's going to be very well coached in general with some quality in the most important aspects of the game to maybe keep this team more competitive than maybe their total talent level is going to project throughout the year. And there you have it, my number 27 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series, the Seattle Seahawks. You made it this far. Hit the like, leave a comment, helps out with the algorithms. Don't put a thumbs down. You made it this far. Even if you hate me, put a thumbs up. It helps with the video, helps with the channel's growth. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos in this series. Yes, that is the series that is on either side of this beautiful head of mine with my backwards hat. Total douche move. But I will see you guys with the next video next time. Thanks for coming.